So, we've got this outline, and we've got good news, bad news, worst news, and an explanation or a challenge that comes out. Here's what I'm going to do. And some of you got your Bibles. You can just, if you want to follow along, it's okay tonight, however you want to do this. But I'm just going to stop. I'm going to start reading and stop at key words. And then we're going to talk about those key words and try to explain those a little bit and help you see what is being told to John. If you remember last week, he saw some really, he's seen all this bad stuff. And last week he saw something really good. He saw the Son of God, the Lamb who had been slain. Who was with him in John's vision? Who was with the Lamb? Who did John see with the Lamb? The 144,000. And they were all there together, and then church broke out. They just started having worship, and they're singing, and they were singing a song that only they could learn. And most of your Bible scholar people say that all that is the 144,000 have been through the worst of the tribulation. They're the only ones who can understand this. They, my story is my story, and your story is your story, but these guys lived something unbelievable. So they're singing the song of Moses, and no one knows exactly what that is, but they're singing a song of praise that's based on what they've been through. And nobody else can sing that except them. And so John is there, and he's watching this stuff, and he's hearing this worship service, and I'm sure he's all caught up in it. And after all the bad things he's seen, that was probably real refreshing for him to see something good. And then if I start in verse 6, he says, "Then I saw another angel flying directly overhead." Another angel. So where was the first angel? And some people get caught up in that and say, well, there's something inconsistent. You can't see another until you've seen the first. Well, y'all, all you got to do is go back a few chapters. In fact, an angel is mentioned in every chapter from 4 through 13. Now in 14. Angels are mentioned in every chapter. So it's almost like if you went to a football game and you were watching all the players out on the field warming up, and then a player dressed out in full uniform comes running through the stands where you're sitting, you might say, "And I saw another football player." So there's nothing inconsistent here about what the Bible's saying. He's just saying, man, there are millions and millions of angels, and then I saw another one. And he's just designating this angel. Nothing inconsistent about it. When he says he was flying overhead, some translations say mid-air. Some translations word it differently. All it means is directly overhead. And so that he could be seen. What's so important about that? Why do you think John would go to the trouble of writing down where he saw the angel? I think it was to make the point that he was very visible. He was overhead. He was, let's see, this English Standard Version says flying directly overhead. Another translation I looked at this afternoon said mid-heaven. Another one says mid-air. Just directly overhead, very, very visible. With an eternal gospel to proclaim. The idea that it's an eternal gospel. Well, let's talk about that. How has the gospel changed over the years? Huh? What? Well, everything's changed.
Yeah.
Right. It's a never change. That word eternal, it just means it's never changed, not changing, and not going to change. The word eternal just means permanent. It means fixed. And so there's nothing ever going to change about the gospel. People get saved today the way they got saved in the 1500s. And if God lets time go on, it'll be the same way people will get saved in the 22nd century, although I really don't think that'll happen. So there's nothing different about the gospel. Don't let anybody tell you that it changes with time. Okay, I saw another angel flying directly overhead with an eternal gospel to proclaim to those who dwell on earth, to every nation, tribe, language, and people. All right. To an eternal gospel to proclaim to those who dwell on earth. My question is, why? We've seen the rapture of the church. If you believe in a rapture, I do. Not everybody does, but I do. The church is raptured. You've had tribulation. You've had all kinds of horrible signs from heaven on earth, wild beasts, demons, Satan himself, earthquakes, volcanoes, meteor showers, large percentage of the world dying. You've had 144,000 super Christians proclaiming the gospel. I mean, if you wanted to get saved, you could get saved. 144,000 super evangelists proclaiming the gospel. Two guys that we haven't talked much about, we will before this is over, the two witnesses. They are fascinating. These guys breathe fire. You don't mess with them. So you've had the two witnesses, 144,000 evangelists, and all the universe shouting at you that there's a problem. So anybody that wanted to get saved had a chance to get saved. And right here, this is right before the end. God sends another super angel with the gospel to proclaim it to every nation, tribe, language, and people. Why?
I'm sitting here thinking it's probably out of whack. But you had the Antichrist revealed. You have to take the mark of the beast and buy, sell, trade. And you might have a person that's trying to decide whether to take that mark or not. Hence,
Maybe.
lying angel.
Maybe. He doesn't desire for anyone to perish, Christy said. But people have had a chance. I mean, folks have had plenty of chances. Yeah. Y'all, I'm just being a devil's advocate.
They get more hungry every day.
Yeah. Y'all, if we had any one thing to take away from these verses, it's that here at the very end, he's still chasing you. He's still, he had his 144,000 Billy Grahams out there preaching day and night, meteors falling around them, volcanoes blowing up in front of them, demons flying by, and they're out there just preaching away. And even with that, he says, I got to do one more thing. One more thing. And he sends out this angel with the eternal gospel proclaiming to everybody. Now that kind of blows my mind too. Because some of these were vile people. Some of these had done some nasty things.
You got the abyss that's walking the earth.
You got the worst of the worst walking the earth. And yet God said, I got to give them one more chance. One more chance. Wow. If you take anything home with you tonight, that's it. That if people don't think God loves the wicked, including me, there's the proof. So what was he saying? He said with a loud voice. Now that in the Greek, that's a special word. It means a voice nobody can not hear. Y'all remember, bless his heart, I loved him to death. He was kind of a 2 houses over neighbor, Danny Hardy. Y'all remember Danny? Some of y'all didn't know Danny. Danny was deaf as a doorknob, kind of like some of y'all. And when Danny thought he was whispering, Danny couldn't whisper. And we'd go to start church. Y'all remember that? Some of y'all, you remember?
Oh, yeah.
You'd go to start church, and Danny's talking to the guy next to him. Well, you know, the other day, he thought he was whispering. Sometimes I just have to wait until Danny finished talking. He had a loud voice, even when he thought he was whispering. Well,
It's like Mark 5 singing, he'd hold a note after everybody else quit.
Yeah, you could hear Danny when you didn't want to hear Danny.
Loved him to death.
You loved him to death, yeah. I could tell you some funny stories about Danny, but another time. Loud voice. Y'all have known people that just, you could hear them in a crowded room from all the way across. That's kind of what this word is talking about. Somebody that you could not help but hear. He proclaimed with a loud voice, fear God and give him glory, because the hour of his judgment has come. And worship him who made the heaven and the earth, the sea, and the springs of the water. You know, this was kind of a mixed bag of gospel that he's given them. But it's not just beating them over the head and hellfire brimstone. He says, yeah, judgment's here. It's time to make a decision, but let's worship. Let's praise the one who's giving you this opportunity. So, really, really neat expression of God's love. So, there's verses 6 and 7. Good news. We got one last chance, no matter how bad we've been.
So what I'm reading here, you got one angel
Yes.
flying through the heavens
Yes.
with a loud voice,
Yes.
and everybody on the earth can hear it.
Yes.
I mean,
Yeah. Now, did they hear him all at once? I don't know. Did he, like we think Santa Claus does, did he circle the earth so that everybody could hear him and he continually proclaimed? You know, that's kind of how I see it. But one way or the other, everybody heard his voice. Everybody on earth heard this message.
Isn't that the ultimate freedom of choice? That God
Yeah.
provides for us?
Yeah, yeah.
Doesn't get any more.
No, no. All right, that's the good news. We got some bad news coming. Verse 8. Another angel, a second, followed, saying, Fallen, fallen is Babylon, the great. All right, let me stop there. Babylon. What's Babylon? Yes, Babylon is a city, but that's not exactly what it's talking about here. It's really talking about a world system. It's kind of like when the Bible uses the word Antichrist, sometimes it's talking about little a Antichrist. There have been thousands, if not millions, of Antichrists. You know, I think of people like Nero that burned Rome and had Christians executed, blaming them for it. I think of people like Herod that had all those babies killed, thinking he was going to kill Jesus. I think of somebody like Hitler, who massacred 7 million Jews. You know, we could go on and on through history of little Antichrist. But then there's big Antichrist. There's also a spirit of Antichrist that we see all. You know, y'all, when I was watching TV back last year, and we'd see pictures of them literally burning down Minneapolis, Minnesota, or Seattle, Washington, or Portland, Oregon, I would get chill bumps thinking that is the spirit of Antichrist. That is demonic. I don't know that humans can come up with that kind of evil on their own. I think that was demonically. I think there were demons of hell just laughing, and maybe some of them in the crowd. So Antichrist is all kind of things. Well, now when it uses this term Babylon, yes, there was a city of Babylon, and there may be another city someday. It may be a renewed, revised, revitalized city that Antichrist is going to use as his capital. A lot of people think that's going to happen. There are digs, or archaeological digs, where Babylon, the capital of the Babylonian Empire, where it was, or all kind of archaeological digs, and it would make a lot of sense for the Antichrist to establish a new city there as his capital. But this is really, when it talks about Babylon the Great, it's talking about the world system, a worldwide political, economic, religious conglomerate that it's talking about. It's also interesting the way this is worded. Fallen is Babylon the Great. She who made all nations drink the wine of the passion of her sexual immorality. Everything is in past tense. It's fallen. She made everybody drink this intoxication. It's past tense, as if it's a done deal. Y'all, at this point, when John's hearing this, Babylon hadn't fallen. It hadn't happened yet. And that's pretty common in biblical prophecy. A lot of times the prophets will say stuff that hadn't happened, but they say it as if it already has, just to drive home the point that it's a done deal. You can't stop it. How infuriating must that be to the enemy when you say you lost? Oh, we haven't lost yet. No, you're good as lost. So that's what the angels say. Can y'all think of another time in history, in Bible history, when people tried to create a one world order based on idolatry? Yes, Tower of Babel. And most biblical archaeologists think the Tower of Babel was right where the city of Babylon was. And so now here at the end, the new one world order. And y'all, every time you hear a United States politician talk about we need a one world order, this is where it's coming from. It is, and I'm not saying we're there, but we may be in the prelude, the early stages, because that's how it's all going to get pulled together, as a one world economic, political, religious culture, a one world order. Maybe in Babylon, who knows? This thing about made them drink the sexual immorality. Sexual immorality is going to be a big part of it. But more than that, probably a better translation, and then there's nothing wrong with that. I'm not saying it's an error, but a clearer translation might be made everyone drink her adulteries. What kind of adultery? Spiritual adultery, where you sell out to the enemy. In a sexual relationship, husband and wife, you give yourself, body, soul, spirit, if it's a good marriage, you give yourself to the other person. And there's a oneness. So when we say a sexual immorality or union, we think physical, but it's really talking about just a total sellout. And that's what it's going to be in the end, is people just totally, and that's what it takes to become a Christian, is a sellout. And that's what people are going to be doing there. And so the bad news is, these people who have done this, you have already lost. You are on the losing team and you don't even know it. So that's the bad news. Good news, people have a second chance. Bad news, if you don't take advantage of that second chance, you have already lost. Worse news, verse 9. Another angel, a third, followed them, saying with a loud voice, if anyone worships the beast and its image, and receives the mark on his forehead or on his hand, he will also drink the wine of God's wrath, poured full strength into the cup of his anger, and he will be tormented with fire and sulfur in the presence of the holy angels and in the presence of the Lamb. And that's verses 9 and 10. Let me get to 11 later. Boy, that's full stuff right there. Drink. Here's play on words. He just got through saying that Babylon, the evil movement of Satan, made people drink the Antichrist's cup of immorality or spiritual adultery. So just picture in your mind people, Satan's handing out the Kool-Aid, and people are grabbing it, selling out, and drinking Satan's Kool-Aid. Okay, that's the image there in verse 8. In verse 9 and 10, he comes back with another angel saying, okay, if you just drink that cup, I got another cup for you. And this one is filled with God's wrath, God's anger. So, you know, a little play on words there. Then when he says, it's full strength. Now, that sounds odd for him to say full strength, but he's explaining something, and there's a biblical reference. Can you think of a time in the Bible when there's a reference to wine not being full strength? In the New Testament.
Wedding.
Yeah. At Cana, at the wedding feast, when Jesus turned water into wine. What did they say when he turned water to wine, then he told the servants to come over and taste it? What was their observation of that wine? Why'd you say the good stuff for last? It was normal in those days. I don't know, people may do it nowadays. I don't drink, so I don't know. But it was normal to make it last longer, that they would have the wine and they would dilute it or mix it with water and literally water it down to make more of it and make it last. And then when Jesus turned the water to wine, it was unpolluted. It was pure. And the servant says, man, why'd you save the good stuff for last? So that was a normal Hebrew, Jewish type custom, is to water down the wine. And it's almost funny if you think about it, what this angel's saying. It's, okay, folks, you drank the cup of Satan. Now you fixing to drink the cup of God's wrath, and he ain't going to dilute it. It is full strength. There's nothing watered down about his anger. He saved the good stuff, depending on how you look at it. Let's see. If anyone worships the beast in its image and receives the mark on his forehead or his hand, he will also drink the wine of God's wrath, poured full strength into the cup of his anger, and he will be tormented with fire and sulfur in the presence of his holy angels and in the presence of the Lamb. One translation says he will suffer day and night. Couple of things here. Why do you think he said you're going to suffer in the presence of the angels and in the presence of the Lamb?
Because when you take the mark of the beast, you're giving your life and your soul to that Antichrist. Mm-hmm. Just like Jesus wants you to do with him.
Right.
And it must have really ticked him off.
It's kind of like if I say something that directly offends you, Eric, and I realize I offended you. So next week I get up and say, if I offended anyone last week, I'm sorry. Now let's move on. That wasn't an apology. An apology is when I walk up to you and say, Eric, I offended you and I'm sorry, I didn't mean to. I want things right between us. That's an apology. So, yeah, there's some accountability here that you're going to drink the cup of God's wrath and you're going to drink it right in front of him because he's the one you offended. It's not that God gets gets pleasure out of this, because Christy's already told us the verse in 2 Peter that he gets no pleasure out of he wants everybody to come to repentance. He doesn't get a kick out of people suffering, but they will answer to the one they offended. And that's just going to add to their shame and add to their guilt and add to their embarrassment because they'll stand before him. Also, the translation of the ESV doesn't add this, but when it says day and night, I talk to people. I mentioned this last week in my Sunday sermon. I can't tell you the conversations I've had. Y'all have had them too. Y'all know this. That people are so mixed up on hell. They think hell's, just a big party. Get with my buddies and drink and chase women and just have a good time in hell. And that is so idiotic. Then there's another idea that, there's going to be punishment. We see these movies where there's punishment and then they get away and they wander around and they find a new life for themselves. And it's hard and it's work and it's struggle because it's hell. There's not going to be a break. It says day and night. And one commentary I was reading said to really understand the word that's used here, in the English it could have said day and night, weekly, daily, hourly, and second by second. There's never a break, is what this angel is saying. That's the worst news. That there's never a break to the torment, the embarrassment, the shame of God's wrath. Then he wraps it up in verses 12 and 13 when he says, here is a call for the endurance of the saints, those who keep the commandments of God and their faith in Jesus. He's just saying, look, go back to this, and if you accepted the good news, just hang in there. It's going to get all right. Yeah, be strong, to persevere. And then somebody mentioned about Martha. Maybe Erica was in your prayer. I don't remember exactly. But verse 13, I heard a voice from heaven saying, write this. And this is a great verse I've used no telling how many times in funerals. Blessed are the dead who die in the Lord from now on. It doesn't get any better for a person than to die as a Christian. Blessed indeed, says the Spirit, that they rest from their labors, for their deeds follow them. So, you got good news in this section, you got bad news, you got worse news, and then you got a really upbeat, he almost ends with a warm fuzzy, a good feeling that, hey, it's hard, but hang in there. Be faithful, because it's worth it. What are the takeaways? God is ever chasing all people, not just white people, not just Baptists, not just Southerners, not just Republicans. God is chasing everybody. And if you don't leave with anything, leave with that. That person that you've written off saying they are hopeless, God's chasing.
Would it be correct to say that all the prophecy that needed to be fulfilled has been fulfilled today, and the church could be raptured any minute?
I think in general that's true. I think there are probably people who would take some objection with it, depending on how they interpret a lot of the prophecies. But I can't think of any major prophecy that hasn't been fulfilled up until Revelation. Now, we still got, obviously we hadn't had a meteor shower fall on the earth or hordes of demons coming out of the abyss. But that's after the church is gone. Hopefully.
Well, I think you pointed out one night that, the main one was